I like VTubers. I like comic books. Let's mash them together and draw some VTubers using the Marvel method. Here's my first sketches and some inking practice that I had done to prepare. These are BasilWoof and BooTheRat, two indie VTubers and some of the first that really caught my attention as I was first exploring the genre. Not only are they absolutely hilarious, the way they've crafted their channels together with their own art style and designs, the world that they've crafted for themselves and their characters, was immediately eye-catching. They call it Stinky Hollow. 100%, go check them out after you finish up with this video. Channeling that inspiration into picking up my pencils again to make some fan art feels right. And I'm glad to have Boo and Basil be the first in this series. Now that does carry the unfortunate connotation that, well, theirs is probably going to be the worst, but that's okay. It'll be fun to redo this project again later after my skills have grown and compare the progress. It's all in service of practicing and getting better so that the most important drawing and character design will be as good as it possibly can be. I mean, mine, you know. Soon to come. All right, let's get going. These are comic book art boards. These are 11 by 17, thick enough to carry ink without getting waterlogged like the sketch paper does, and very resistant to impressions from the pencils, even if you're like me and draw with the grace and elegance of a grizzly bear gorging on garbage. And those dimensions are important too, so you might be thinking that the board looks way bigger than any comic book that you might have seen before. And you'd be right. If I take any old comic book here, say this one here, we can line this up from the corner and move it all along the diagonal. Any rectangle we make will be in scale to the final 6.625 inch by 10.1875 inch, very specific standard American comic book size. Working in a larger size means that we can really render out the details that we otherwise might not have been able to get working on the smaller page. Next, starting off, we have our graphite pencils, the full gamut for shading. And if you're unfamiliar, the shading pencils here are made on a scale of hardness of the lead. 2H is the hardest, and I have mine down to 6B. Harder leads means lighter marks, and importantly for the line work that we're about to do, less sharpening. I found I prefer line work with the 4H or HB, somewhere in the medium rare side of the scale. And we've also got this. This one's real fun. It's not a wad of chewed up bubblegum. This is what's called a kneaded eraser. Good in plastic, and we can shape this to whatever we might need for the job at hand. All right, let's get to penciling. I've gone through and laid down some of the basic shapes of the figures, plotted out some of the graphical elements, set my vanishing point and my horizon, and set myself up a basic grid. Grids can help visualize your foreshortening of the body. Now, what the hell is foreshortening? People, if you notice, have all kinds of dangly bits that can go toward or away from the camera. So how do we render that out? The spirals here are me attempting to do what's called the slinky method, to picture how the limbs go forward and back, as the limb will shorten in perspective as it turns in the third dimension. Everyone has their own drawing styles, but this has been a big piece of advice that has helped me get started again. At the beginning stage here, throw out any kind of idea of detail. Don't worry about specific contours, focus on capturing the basic shapes of the body. Any form can be broken down into basic shapes like cylinders, cubes, cones, and spheres. Arms and legs are cylinders joined together. The head is a big round egg or circular shape. The pelvis can be simplified down into this sort of cup shape. And the top of the torso, we can think of this kind of axe shape, more like the chest plate of armor maybe. Once we have the basics, we can start to imagine how the shapes look as they twist and turn and roll in the third dimension. If you're like me and grew up with video games, this actually might come easier to you than you might think. I for sure have spent plenty of time spinning around the trophies in Smash Bros. Melee. You can start to see in the mind's eye how the object would look on that screen as it moves. And then once the simples are down, adding the detail on top of that will come much easier. Moves, motion, it's a key element of visual language that comic books use to communicate their stories, is the montage of sequential art. We want our characters and objects in one panel to have enough implied motion that the mind can easily fill in the frames from one panel to the other. Now, we are working on a cover rather than a sequence of panels, but we still want to be able to tell the story of these two characters. What were they doing right before or right after this frame? So let's think back to that Marvel method. We, the penciler, have just received the script for the book from their writer. Now, before writing out any dialogue or captions, the writer is just giving us a simple outline of what will happen over the course of this book. It'll be fairly vague and loose on the details, so that gives us, the penciler, a lot of freedom to make decisions in rendering out that outline. The Marvel method was a great big game of telephone. Writer to penciler, back to the writer for the full dialogue, to the inker, then to the letter, and then to the colorist, typically, with each person taking over key parts of the overall storytelling language of the book. So in our scenario, the writer of this book hands us over the script, and it says in so many words, Boo and Basil are setting off on their next adventure. Yeah, we're working with Stan on this one. We're on our own. All right, so what do I, as the penciler, know about these two characters? I know that they're a couple. Boo is a witchy rat woman that brews potions. Basil is a big himbo werewolf. Boo has some sass and sultriness to her, and Basil is athletic, running and jumping through the woods with his stinkers, the dogs that represent his chat. Now, in my initial sketch, I had Boo more up on one foot or with the back foot propped up. I was thinking dainty, but I also want to incorporate this element of the potion vial close to Basil's junk. I like the suggestion that happens there. I feel like having her weight on one leg with the arm outstretched like that might feel like she's teetering. So what if she's got one leg out instead, kind of showing a little more thigh from the skirt? And then, all right, I guess I can't put it off any longer. Final boss time, hands. I'm pretty happy with how Boo's ended up, but Basil here will try to make his a bit more dramatic. I want there to be some tension, the fingers curled, really showing off the claws, because that's such a defining feature of werewolves. Hands are a very distinctly human shape. Our brains are really good at recognizing when there's something wrong with them, just like faces. If the fingers are a little bit gnarled, if the wrist doesn't connect at the right angle, the reader is going to recognize that in an instant. But no matter how complex and dynamic the form, like I said, we can break it down into the primary shapes. The palm is a big squarish rectangle. The thumb and the heel of the hand are a line of cylinders, just like the fingers. Break things down into shapes, segments, overlap them, layer the detail on top. You can see I'm trying too hard to focus on the outline and the contours, and it's fighting me every step of the way. I ended up wasting a lot of time moving forward, erasing it all, back and forth, back and forth. It's like trying to put up the siding of a house before building the frame. Last bit of penciling to do. Let's knock out some of the graphical elements that we'd see on a comic book cover. Okay, so let me take you up here to the top left. I've set up 3 boxes here, aping the 90s Marvel style. Boo and Basil are more anime-coded, like a lot of VTubers, and so using the graphical setup of the era, I think will be evocative of the anime and manga boom in America during the late 80s into the 90s. If I pull up another random comic book, say this one, I can walk you through it. First, the corner art here, pricing and issue info here below. And this one here would contain the seal of the Comics Code Authority, the internal review guide that the industry would use for self-censorship to avoid government censorship back in the 50s. The stick is the cornerstone of the world of Stinky Hollow. It's in the emote. It's part of some on-stream games that they play. They have merch of it, so I think that'll be a really nice way to advertise the both of them. Real quick, let's get a little out of order and put on our letterer's hat. It's a hat that I don't particularly enjoy, but anyway. I think we can add a few more nods to their Twitch streams through these. Let's set the price at $11.98, aka the price of 2 tier 1 subs, one for each one. Issue, let's go with 12. 12's a good number. That means the book's made it a whole year. Then, instead of the Comics Code Authority, how about something even more frightening? Twitch, TOS Authority. All right, one more time. Let's put on the letterer hat and make our title. Now, graphic design is very much not my passion. I can't even make the joke. Let's take a look through the collection for some inspiration. Variations of block letters tended to be the norm, and it wasn't until the advent of computer rendering that titles with more dramatic stylings appeared on books. Think Venom. So, okay, let's go with some kind of block lettering, and then I really like this kind of arch or curve here. Let's incorporate that. So, lettering, font, word art. It ain't me. Kerning? It's August in Indy, and I've had plenty of corn, thanks. Block lettering is classic, but also, importantly, less detailed. I can kind of use it as a crutch while I'm the least confident with my lettering skills. This process is measured, precise, carefully planned out, and surgically executed. I'm a big werebear that bumps my Berthen hips into countertops. I'm a little more soup chef than baker, you know? I like this title a lot. Tales from Stinky Hollow. Thinking about that nature of live streaming, that similar kind of high volume output of production, different adventures each day. An anthology type title like that seems right. Here's something a little special for you too. Let's work a bit more meta to give the cover even more depth. So the publishing boxes, we obviously need those to be unobscured by the artwork because those serve a human function. So I'm able to overlap those over Boo's leg and hat, pushing the art into the next plane behind. Now, up here on the title, let's do the opposite. Let's do a little so that one of Basil's ears overlaps the title, like that. Now that pushes the title into the next plane behind the art. And with this arc of the last row of the title, I think we can actually get a bit of a receding effect on the letters, making even more of an illusion of depth. All right, let's call it good on the penciling. The final step for us, inking. I am equally a novice at this stage, but inking as a practice is so distinct to American comic books to me that it's becoming my favorite part of the entire creation process. Quickly, a few different tools we can use for this. There's two general ways that traditional inking was done, with pens and with brushes. I do have a dip pen that I've been practicing with, but I'm not confident with it at all yet, and instead I've got these scripter pens. Super fine tip down to 0.5 and scaling upward from there. I've got some fine tip brushes, black India ink, and for when we make the inevitable mistakes, we got this stuff here. Dr. Martin's Bleed Proof White. Now this is a gouache white paint that will absolutely knock out even this deep dark black ink that we're using should we need to. Now the idea of inking, of course, is laying down the areas of black ink where they'll appear on the final page. That means the characters, of course, but the boxes and the text as well. Dynamic is the name of the game with inking. We want variations in our line thickness, dynamic shadows. We as the inker have a lot of control over the final expression of the piece. Generally, lines become thicker as they come towards the camera and thinner as they recede away. We can emphasize or de-emphasize, give texture, dramatize the mood. This is not, resoundingly not, the process of simply tracing over the lines of the penciler. Before the big superstars like McFarlane, Lee, and Liefeld in the 90s, the pace of production meant that pencilers weren't typically adding in a tremendous amount of shading detail in their layouts. And as well, before full color printing, comics were colored with Ben Day dots. You know the things, the minuscule dots of cyan, yellow, and magenta that layer over one another to create color. The colorist takes the comic board, plot out which hues go where, and then we'll be making plates of overlapping different concentrations of these dots. And we can use this method to make gradients of color going into shadows, but doing so will be a time-expensive process, and time is money. And that means that for the majority of classic comics printing, only a single hue would be assigned to any particular shape on the page. And on top of all of that, again in the name of the almighty dollar, this would eventually be printed on pulp newsprint paper, which even when new has a yellowish tinge to it that will dull the color. Modern comics with full color printing are printed on really nice high gloss paper, which I'm honestly not super thrilled about, and I prefer matte, but that's another video. Anyway, so with all of that, how do we inform the lighting of our scene? Black ink. Isn't that nuts? That's just so cool to me. So let's say that the light of the scene is coming in from a high key light to the upper right corner of the frame. So that means that our shadows are going to be more prominent on the left lower side of our characters. We can really play up some style in the inking too. We can emphasize the thicker lines on the left side, go deeper into black over large areas, maybe too large of areas. One of the main techniques that we're using is called feathering, the use of parallel-ish lines going into black. The idea is to generally follow the curves of the form, the folds of cloth, the outlines of musculature. I can feel myself being a bit tight while I'm working. The motion of inking should come from the elbow and the wrist primarily. I'm all the way up in my shoulder. You can see that making my lines a little shaky and uncertain. The technique and confidence are just going to come with time and practice. There's no other way about it. I mentioned that Boo and Basil are more anime coded, and manga inking is an entirely different set of skills and practices. For one, most manga has traditionally not been printed in color. Panels and layouts will be a little bit more maximalist with the inking because that's their main tool for detail. Here with an American comic style, we can play with the contrast of black ink with the eventual color. We can be a bit looser with our inking. If you're tense like me, then your image will look tense. We can leave a little bit more areas of white for the colorist to flex their style on. Any mistakes? Well, that's what we have the bleed-proof white for. Look at how well that does to cover up, and it dries very fast. But the thing to remember with this paint, gouache is water activated, even when it's dry. The wet ink activates the paint and gums up the pen tip. This is where using a brush or dip pen is very helpful. They'll also reactivate the paint, but they'll be putting enough ink over the top to show over the paint. And then you'll just be able to simply clean out any left in the brush or the nib with some water. Speaking of, let me show you another neat little trick. I laid down some of these areas of black on Basil's tail, and I'm not thrilled with it at all. While going to white it all out, I stumbled upon this dry brush technique. Look at that texture. That's really cool and makes the area distinct. Maybe I can bring that into the other fur areas to match. Let's not get too carried away. Tips, tricks, and more. Here's another cool trick we can use with this white. So let's go to some of these areas where an area of black overlaps with another area of black. With a brush a little more loaded with paint, we can make these cut-ins with the ink. It helps make those areas feel a little bit more planned. It gives them a little bit more separation from one another, like up here where the hat is overlapping Basil's arm. All right, I think we're just about done here. At this point, it would be off to the colorist to plot out the colors. Learning how to use the Ben-Day dots is something I'd love to do one day, and making plates and actually physically printing a comic book sounds really, really cool. Probably really, really expensive. But for now, I think this is enough. But there is something we can do to add a touch of color here. I think colored pencils ought to mimic the look of the dots. I've got these mixed colored space colored pencils. Let's pick something here to color as a focal point. Booze Potion. I like that idea. All right, so critiques. Overall, I'm thrilled with how this turned out. I need to learn and practice penciling ink. I need all my skills. I need to practice more. I think that Basil's hands ended up being smaller than they should be, and Boo's foot is out of proportion, and there's just something that's just not quite right with Basil's face. There's some just brightness maybe that's not really there, some animation. I think maybe the eyes could have gone a bit bigger. I think I can attribute some of that to me not being comfortable enough with my base skills to really be able to push a style. I think I could have pushed both of their poses a bit more. Having Basil hunched over a bit more, more angular. Make the posture more dynamic, Or Boo's thigh should just be like a lot thicker. Style develops after skills are built, so we'll see how that progresses through other projects. On positives, I like the whole layout that I've achieved. I think I've really captured a comic book look, and I like how I've been able to use what I know about comic art history to inform a lot of the decisions that I've been making. I really like the composition. I like the way that Boo and Basil interact with one another. There's something more we can do to push the suggestiveness of Boo gripping her potion bottle over Basil's crotch, but that combined with her tail wrapping around Basil's leg are design details that I'm really proud of. If they were to ever see this image or even see this video, I hope they like it. Stinky Hollow is no small part of inspiring me to pick up the pencils and pens again, and I hope this fan art can be a token of my gratitude. On to the next one. I'm Day of the Bear. Catch y'all next time.